So in 2023, this was officially the year, guys, where Canadian mortgage debt actually surpassed the entire GDP of Canada. We're just talking about mortgage debt. Just mortgage debt. We're not talking about corporate debt. We're not talking about private business debt. We're not talking about government debt. More Canadian businesses are going bankrupt and the consumer is at their wits' end. So let's get into what is happening right now and what is going on. So first of all, I want to talk about retail sales before we get into the CEBA loans and what's going on there. So we'll get into this in a second, but let's talk about retail sales for a second. A lot of people talk about retail sales and they say, oh, retail sales are actually up year over year. And they would be right. When you look at this chart here, you can see that retail sales are actually up right now. But what they're not telling you is actually these numbers aren't adjusted for inflation. So when you actually look at the numbers adjusted for inflation, they are particularly bad and particularly weak. And that is what we are seeing in the retail sector happen. You are not seeing sales increase enough to get over that inflationary hurdle that has happened. Let's face it, guys, if you look at this chart right here, you can see in the last month, we had retail sales year over year increase 2.71%. Do you seriously, honestly think that inflation has been less than 2.71%? No, it hasn't. It's probably been at a minimum 5%, if not 6 or 7%. So the real inflation rate is what matters, not these phony numbers that the government puts out. And that means that in real terms, these businesses are actually struggling with their sales because the consumer is struggling to keep up, because basically what's happening is the cost of everything has absolutely soared. And you've not only got problems in the retail sector, you've also got problems happening with the businesses as well, as we're going to get into right now with what's going on with the CEBA loans. So basically the government, as you guys know, came out with their full economic statement, and we'll just whiz through this real quick. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business is deeply disappointed the federal government's 2023 full economic statement did not include any measures to help small businesses deal with the current challenges that they are facing, notably by further extending the Canada Emergency Business Account CEBA repayment deadline. Now, guys, as you know, this was one of these stimulus programs from back in 2020 and 2021. This was the CEBA loan. And basically, they want an extension on these loans, and they get into why exactly they want an extension on these loans. So sadly, Ottawa ignored the pleas of thousands of small business owners across Canada and didn't address the crippling pandemic debt that is weighing on small firms. Over 2/3 of small businesses still carry pandemic debt at an average of $126,000, said CFIB President Dan Kelly. So obviously, if they're struggling to pay back that loan, that isn't a good thing, is it? It doesn't really mean good things are going on in the Canadian economy if they can't pay back that $126,000. And I know that the hotel industry, the restaurant industry was particularly hit bad, but it's not just that. It's the airline industry and other industries that were also hit bad. And you know, you have to ask the question, with the government's response to everything that happened in 2020 and 2021 and the shutdown, do they actually need to provide this? Is this something that they should be providing? And honestly, I don't know the answer to that, but I would like to hear your views in the comments, so let me know. So that's what's happening with the CEBA repayment deadline. So it says 2/3 of small businesses do not have the money to repay their CEBA loan, and half of those have no capacity to borrow in order to secure the forgivable portion. If a business cannot repay the loan in full by January 18th, their CEBA debt increases by as much as 50%, creating the potential for 250,000 business failures. Now, the reality is that they're probably blowing that out of proportion there, but there would be possibly significant business failures as a result of this. And it's not just these loans though, is it? It's other loans as well that these businesses are struggling to keep up on because interest rates have risen so rapidly. And quite frankly, it was the government's response to what happened that caused this situation to be what it is today. So you have to put some blame on the doorstep of the government here, even if you believe that we shouldn't bail these people out, because at the end of the day, these businesses are probably going to fail anyway. Because if you think about it, if we're heading into rough economic times, which I think many of you would agree are coming, what's it going to mean if you just extend them more credit? Obviously, they're probably not going to pay that back as well. And then I want to thank Nathaniel for sending me this. We're going to get into some insolvency statistics right now. This report is incredibly good, guys. I'm going to leave a link in the description to this report so you can go check it out. I'm not going to go into the individual by province. I'll just do an overview for Canada and what's happening with insolvencies for consumers, businesses, corporations. But if you want to dig into your individual province, go ahead and I will leave this report in the description. So first of all, let's talk about consumers, insolvencies, and the trajectory of how many people are going bankrupt and the proposals for bankruptcy. So right now, bankruptcies are actually flat, proposals are up. So that likely is going to lead into a higher bankruptcy rate as we go into the future. So essentially, proposals are up near 30%. So that isn't a good thing. And you can go in here and look by province, and the typical provinces that you would expect are struggling bad. And this is on the consumer side. So now if we flip over to insolvencies by business, we're going to take a look and see where Canada is at for that. And you can see that there is a significant difference there. You've got proposals that are up near 50% right there. And you've also got bankruptcies that are up 34%. So that is a very, very big difference when you really think about it. And it shows how weak the economy is in Canada. I think we all know this on this channel, but the reality is a lot of people don't understand this, don't realize this. I mean, we've seen it in the data now. We're officially in a recession. Yippee, you know, the mainstream media is finally going to come out and say we're in a technical recession. It's just crazy how far they actually are behind in the mainstream media. So anyway, let's take a look and continue on here. So this is insolvencies filed by corporations. And if you go down to Canada, again, similar to the businesses, you're up around 50% on proposals, and bankruptcies are up around 37%. So that is a big difference in the amount of proposals and bankruptcies that are happening across Canada. And last but not least, we're going to go to individual businesses right now and see what's going on with them. So you basically got proposals that are up around 50% again, as you can see there. And you've also got bankruptcies that are up around 21% there. So thank you so much, Nathaniel, for sending me this information, because some of this information is hard to find, guys. You would be surprised. In fact, you wouldn't be surprised on how hard it is to find this data. So anyway, what's going to happen in the future is going to be difficult to say, but when you've got things like this happening, the interest rate shock that is going to lead into the economy, how's that going to affect people's spending? That's what you have to really think through here. So you can add interest rate shock to the list of financial stresses for many Canadians renewing fixed rate mortgages over the next couple of years. The Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation says close to 300,000 homeowners have already been hit with significantly higher payments as they renew at much higher interest rates. So obviously this is a big pinch point for Canada, because Canada has been in one of the largest real estate bubbles in the world. And if you were thinking real estate bubbles just because of the size, that means that they can continue forever. Just take China as an example. China was the biggest housing bubble in the world, and that bubble is popping in China as well. So, you know, you've got all these people that are paying more money in terms of interest rate costs to the banks right now and financial institutions. Well, all that money is being sucked up and it's not going into the economy. So that all creates this doom loop that I've talked about before, where essentially everything feeds into this self-reinforcing cycle where you've got people spending more on interest rates. That means that the job market gets worse because the business prospects are worse. And then that leads into more unemployment. And then that means people are spending even less. And it just goes round and round in this vicious circle. But it's definitely happening. And it doesn't matter where you are, you're not going to be shielded from this. Quarter of Albertans cut back on basic needs to pay energy bills. This is November 14th, 2023, guys. 1 in 7 Canadians reducing spending on or went without necessities like food and medicine to pay for utilities in 2023. We've obviously seen a decrease in energy costs this year. I mean, it hasn't been substantial enough that we're back to where we were before, before all this inflationary stuff started happening, but we have seen a decrease in energy costs of sorts. But we've also seen the carbon tax increase, which has kind of offset that. And Alberta, even though it's an energy resource rich province, it's one of the most expensive provinces for utilities. It's something people don't actually talk about a lot. So of course, Albertans are going to get hit hard as well. And a lot of Albertans have also carrying a lot of debt. We know that in Alberta in particular, the debt, the reports from Equifax and TransUnion show that the non-mortgage debt is the highest in places like Alberta. So even though their mortgage debt might be a little less, guess what? Their other forms of debt are actually higher, and those are most likely variable rate at a much higher interest rate. So that, of course, leads into what happens with the economy in Alberta, and it is getting worse. I hear from many of you who are business owners, especially in the auto industry right now, that are being hit particularly bad. But it doesn't matter if you're in the auto industry or you're working in retail, you're being hit by this because you can see that people aren't spending as much money as they were before. And you're beginning to see a slowdown. You know, we've put up this chart many of times and they've updated it, but there's definitely now a slowdown in the growth of mortgage debt. And if you look going all the way back to 1990, the last time mortgage debt was this slow was in 1999. Think about that, guys. And it's showing no signs of letting up, obviously, considering the housing bubble that we're in. So Canadian residential mortgage growth continues to slow. The outstanding balance grew 0.2%, $4.2 billion, and hit a total of $2.1 trillion in September. And just so that you know, guys, this is GDP. So in 2023, this was officially the year, guys, where Canadian mortgage debt actually surpassed the entire GDP of Canada. We're just talking about mortgage debt. Just mortgage debt. We're not talking about corporate debt. We're not talking about private business debt. We're not talking about government debt. We're just talking about mortgage debt. So that goes to show how leveraged Canadians are and how big this real estate bubble actually got. And I think a lot of people really struggle to understand that. But from my view, I think it's pretty simple. We've been in this massive housing bubble that people have refused to acknowledge. And now that is coming to an end. And obviously you can see this through all the incoming data that we have access to. So anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, you might like this video here. You might like this playlist here. If you're looking for a VPN, go to expressvpn.com/marketmania to get around all the censorship laws and make sure that you're protected online from government overreach. I will see you in the next one. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.